colleagues, dear distinguished guests, my name is Nadia Shulova, and I am President of Research Committee Sociology of Science and Technology. It's a great honor for us to open a special session in memory of first RC23 President, Robert Kim Merton. Robert Merton was one of the leading sociologists of the 20th century. The interest in his activity does not weaken. Merton's name is connected with many directions in sociological research, but first of all, it turned into eponym for Sociology of Science. The phrase, the Mertonian Sociology of Science, was widely accepted by the scientific community. In 1966, Robert Merton became one of the founder, organizer, and the first president of the Research Committee on Sociology of Science of the International Sociological Association. Merton's activity at this post was in many ways decisive for theoretical and institutional development of the sociology of science worldwide. In honor and memory of Robert Kim Merton, the RC23 committee has established the Robert Merton Award for distinguished contribution to the sociology of science and technology. ISA Executive Committee approved it in May 2016. RC23 produced the silver medal with special design. According to the certificate, it is produced in a single copy on the 4th of July 2018. It is also a special date. The 4th of July is a birthday of Robert Merton. The first Lifetime Achievement Award will be granted during this special session. I kindly invite Vice President of our Research Committee and Board Member of the Award Committee, Alice Ambrea, to announce the decision.
It is my great pleasure and honor to inform you that Francisco Sagasti was the winner of the first Robert Merton Award for Distinguished Contribution to the Sociology of Science and Technology, awarded by the RC23 in recognition of his contribution to the field of social studies of science and technology. It is my great pride as a fellow Latin American to present to you a little bit of Francisco Sacasti's achievements. He has been one of the leading scholars and policy makers in the field of social studies of science and technology, particularly with reference to developing countries for the last 50 years. Since he's published his first monographs and academic papers in the early 70s, Dr. Sagasti has made significant conceptual and policy analysis contributions to the better understanding of the relations between science, technology, and society in developing countries. In addition, he has played important roles as policymaker at the national and international levels, using his theoretical and historical insights to better understand the role that knowledge plays in the process of development. Professor at the Graduate School of the Universidad del Pacífico with a PhD in Operations Research and Social Systems Sciences from the University of Pennsylvania, Professor Sagasti has, from his very first papers, focused on the application of the systems approach to science and technology policy making and planning, on technology transfer, and on planning methods for scientific research and technological development in developing countries. A good example of his work is one of his first international projects, the large-scale comparative policy research project on science and technology policy implementation in 10 developing countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Since then, his achievements have been many. He has been visiting lecturer at universities in the United States, Europe, and developing regions. In Peru, Dr. Sagasti has been founder and executive director of GRADE, a policy-oriented think tank, advisor to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Education, Industry, and the Prime Minister, advisor to the Chief of the National Planning Institute, and member of the board of the National Council for Science and Technology, and has taught at the University del Pacífico and at the Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú, and has been consulted in numerous private, public, and civil organizations. Dr. Sagasti has published more than 25 books, including Looking Back to Move Forward, a 40-year retrospective of the STPI project. Another one, which has been Science, Technology, and Innovation Policies for Latin America, has been the first comprehensive assessment of the evolution of science and technology policies in the region, which is used as textbook in many graduate courses. Finally, a recent run of Knowledge and Innovation for the Development, the Sisyphus challenge of the 21st century, well expresses some of his focus of his activities. He's also the author of more than 150 papers and book chapters. Therefore, combining academic research with policy practice throughout his academic and professional life, Dr. Sagasti has made an unique contribution that amply justifies the award of the Robert Merton Prize for Distinguished Contribution to Sociology of Science and Technology. Thank you very much.
It is a great honor for us that Dr. Harriet Tuckerman, Professor Emerita of Columbia University, the wife of Robert Merton, former board member of RC23, and noted sociologist of science in her own right, come to our special event. Dear Harriet, we invite you to say some words and grant the medal to Professor Francisca Sagasti.
I didn't know that I would have the chance to award the first Robert Merton Medal of the International Sociological Association and the RC23, but I'm delighted that that's the case. As I told Nadia Ashuleva a little earlier today, I was in Evian. I was at the very first session of what came to be the RC23. Did I think at the time that some 34 years later that I would turn up here in Toronto, across the Atlantic, and that the field would be as vibrant and as active as it is? I was not that prescient. What I can say is you can think of me as a historical artifact. I think I am the only living person in this room. There are no dead people in this room. I think that I'm the only person in this room that goes back that far. And it's testimony to the endurance of the research that interests us all. Robert K. Merton, and I emphasize the K because there's a Robert C. Merton, who is his son, who is an exceedingly distinguished economist, would have been very pleased with the willingness of Nadia and Alice and all of our friends on the RC committee to get this prize established. He would have been delighted, I'm sure, that this what I am discovering is a kind of walking total sociologist has received it. I say total because I discovered today at lunch that we even have a sociologist of dance who has received this medal. Bob Merton really liked the ballet, but never conceived that there would be a sociology of dance. So, just let me say that Professor Sagasti is a wonderfully apt recipient to receive this medal. Remember that Robert Merton doctoral dissertation, Science, Technology, and Society in 17th century Britain, was written in the 1930s. He remained active in the field. His very last book, The Travels and Adventures of Serendipity, was published when he was 93 years old. Well, that's a demonstration of commitment. He was a sociologist for all seasons, and so is Professor Sagasti.
Yes, Professor Sagasti, please, we invite you, a notable Iranian scientist, to come and receive this award. Yes. Yeah. 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 And this is certificate
This
to
is
the
the certificate to the
yes.
medal, which
Yeah.
proves that it was coined in the 4th of July.
Yes.
Professor Sagasti. Yes. We'll leave it here.
Well, it's in the first place I want to thank the president of RC23, Dr. Nada Ashunova, Dr. Jaime Jimenez, who was the chairman of the prize awarding committee, and all the other members of the committee, the awards committee, and those of the board. It's quite after what I just heard and what you know about Robert Merton, it's quite difficult to believe that you really deserve this. Such an extraordinary man. I'm also really most grateful and humbled by the decision of Harriet to be here with us, this widow, and a scholar in her own right, whom I really have come to appreciate in the short time we have met. Thanks again to all of you. When thinking what to say after this, the thing I did is went back 50 years ago, when I was just beginning my work in the field of science, technology, and development. By coincidence, when I was looking for a dissertation topic, for a PhD dissertation topic, I happened to be in Lima, exactly at the time when the government had created, for the first time, the National Research Council. Being in my early 20s, saying, oh, this is a wonderful thing. Nobody has studied this field. It's going to be totally new. I went to see the chairman of the Science and Technology Council. He supported me. And when I got back to the university, I looked for an advisor and so on, and then got the advice of Thomas Hughes, the distinguished historian of technology, who basically said, well, if you want to do something in this field, you should start by reading, and he took it from his shelf, this monograph by Robert K. Merton, Science, Technology, and Society in 17th Century England. So he lent me his copy, I read it and returned it to him, and that was the beginning of my relation with some of the ideas that I worked on for a long time. The field I chose was science, technology, and development for one very simple reason. If you take a look at what happens in the world now, we all focus on the disparities in wealth and income between the rich and the poor countries. But if you take a closer look, the real disparity, which is an abyss almost, is not so much on the income or wealth, but in science and technology capabilities. For example, if you take the average income per capita of the richest countries of the OECD, and that of the 40 poorest countries in the world according to the World Bank, the ratio is about 60 to 1. They are 60 times wealthier. But if you take a look at the number of scientific publications per 100,000 inhabitants, the ratio is 180 to 1. And if you take a look at the number of patents filed, the ratio goes up to 1,000 to 1. And this is just for 1 year. Now, if you take into consideration the Matthew effect, in which capabilities and more progress sort of is allocated or comes to those who already have capabilities, and you do that over a long time, you really get a sense of the magnitude of the challenge for developing countries, the great majority, where the great majority of the world population lives, what the challenges they face in trying first even to understand what is going on at the frontiers of science, and then to choose what to use and utilize it effectively. When, after reading the work of Robert Merton, I immediately moved into other areas. Derek de Sola Price, whom I have the privilege of knowing, John D. Bernal, the historian of technology, Louis Mumford, one of his works was so important, Jacob Bronowski, Stephen Toulmin, and June Goodfield, that produced so many works, and also many Latin American intellectuals. The Latin Americans here will recognize the names of Raúl Prebisch and many of the other scholars, thinkers, and policymakers that changed our situation. Let me now, in addition to mention, I have a long list of mentors, but I won't mention it here. I know you're anxious to present your papers and to listen to more substantive work. Let me just try to link the work that I did with some of Robert K. Merton's ideas. In a sense, his obliteration by incorporation is something that I realized after going back to his papers. Because many of the concepts and ideas that I used and many of my colleagues used really stem from the work of Robert Merton. But we didn't know it because they had become so common and so much used. But there is one I would like to emphasize, the concept of middle-range research and theories. His idea of middle-range research is precisely what we try to do and we are doing in science and technology policy for development. You mentioned the STIPI project, in which we worked with 150 researchers all over the world for about 6 years to understand what it took to really develop science and technology capabilities. By the way, as a footnote, you know which country was the one that really took most advantage of that? South Korea. In 1973, Kun Mo-chung, who was the president of the Korean Advanced Institute of Science, joined the STIPI project and worked with us and traveled, and we recently heard him to indicate how much he had learned from that project and put in practice when he became Minister of Science and Technology in Korea for 2 periods over 15 years in total. So middle-range theories work to understand situations and improve them. Then the second idea from Robert Merton that I really think has influenced my work and that of many other people is the idea of unintended consequences of social action. In this sense, what is important to point out in the unintended consequences of social action is something that we found almost everywhere in developing countries, and also it's found in developed countries as well. Science and technology policies often hit a wall and really are destroyed when other policies, government policies in other fields, economic, social, financial, labor, trade, and so on, operate in a contrary sense, really block the intended effect. In order to understand that process of policies coming in contradiction, we developed a series of concepts. explicit, implicit, and resultant policies, equivalent explicit policies, policy instrument structures, vintages, and pathologies as well. What are the things that you find in there? Clusters of function and issue-oriented policy interventions, which I'm sure you realize follows from Merton's work very well, and many other criteria for evaluating policy. So therefore, considering that finding, which is a decided middle range finding, by the way, because it operates in certain contexts, it cannot be generalized totally, and in some cases it works in one area or another. But I would like to propose the second Matthew effect. And let me just quote here the Bible. According to verse 6.3 of the Gospel of Matthew, it says, "When you do merciful deeds, don't let your left hand know what your right hand does." This clearly explains what happens in our developing countries. The merciful deed of policies for developing science and technology capabilities is done with your right hand, but with your left hand you are sabotaging your own efforts with other policies. And this is the second Matthew effect. It's not in St. John's or any other gospel, but Matthew, again in this case. So this second Matthew effect is something that we really have to deal with, and I have, in addition to that, by the way, this is closely related to something I have called at some stage, and Lisa knows about that, the Sisyphus syndrome, which means that you develop science and technology capabilities with lots of effort, pushing the, if you wish, the stone up the hill. And then when you get there, some policymaker, politician with no knowledge, no indifference, incompetence, wipes everything out, the ball rolls down again, and you have to start over and over. Which is even worse, is that even if you're successful in keeping the stone up the hill, there will be other hills to push the stone to. Science and technology never ends, as we know very well in RC23. Okay, let me, I could say many more things. Let me just finish with two comments on not only how Robert Merton's work has affected me in the past, but also how it will influence me in the future. And for this, I would like to say that I got acquainted with the great